Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to the channel and another video. And today I want to talk to you about the camera I shoot with both professionally and here on YouTube, and that is the Nikon or Nikon, however you want to call it, Z6. Now I've been using it, if you follow the channel, since about February, where I had like a crisis of faith, I guess. I was shooting on the Sony a7 III, and then for a few days I went to the Fuji X-T3, and then I went from that to the Z6. So I was, trying to figure out what would work for me, and I landed with the Z6, and now after using it for 6 months, I've got to know the camera really well, its quirks and all that. And so in this video, I wanted to do my top 5 favorite features of this camera that are hopefully gonna help some of you who are maybe on the bench on whether or not you wanna pick this camera up. And so let's just jump into them. So starting off with number 1, and these aren't in any particular order, although this is probably my favorite thing about the camera, ironically enough, and that is the ergonomics of the Nikon Z6. And this is everything from the buttons to the size of the camera, because this thing is perfect. One of the biggest gripes I had with the Sony a7 III was the shallow grip and the small form factor. It just didn't fit well enough in my hand. I always found that I was sort of holding it with 3 fingers walking around. Then switching to the Fuji X-T3, like that was even worse. Like that just barely has a grip at all. So I was wanting something with, a beefier grip, a little bit bigger than the Sony a7 III, because that just was a bit too small. And trying the Nikon Z6 was just like, it just fit perfectly. Like the way the top of the grip is sort of curved, so your finger sort of rests nicely up the top there. The way the on off button is just, the switch there is just right next to the index finger, really easy to use. All the buttons are in logical places and they all have this really nice sort of feel to them. They're nice and deep and really tactile, which is great. And again, like all the buttons are just in logical positions. I don't find myself reaching over to hit them. The viewfinder is fantastic, and the fact that it like extends out the back a bit more than say the Sony's makes it really easy to put up against your face and shoot with. The ergonomics are fantastic. By far the best feeling mirrorless DSLR I have ever held, and I think it's even better than the EOS R, but that's just me. Moving on to number 2, and it's a controversial one, and that is the XQD card. Now, I know everyone's sort of up in arms about the fact that this camera only has 1 card slot and it's an XQD card, which can be a bit of a pain because they're just not readily available, all right? You can't just walk into your local electronics store and pick one up. In fact, I remember I went into a local Staples and they didn't even know what an XQD card was. Like, I had to explain it, and you know there's a problem if you have to start explaining what you're after. That is a bit of an issue, but XQD cards are so rugged and tough, and one of the issues I had with SD cards, they just felt so flimsy, right? With the contacts which are exposed, I always felt worried that they were gonna snap or break. XQD cards, they're beefy. I haven't actually read anywhere online about any of them failing, so the success rate of them is much higher, and that's probably due to the fact that the contacts are actually inside the card rather than exposed like an SD card. But another thing is just, they are so quick. They are super, super fast. At the moment, like in terms of price, they're kind of up there with UHS-2 SD cards anyway, so that's not a big issue. But I absolutely love XQD cards, it's fantastic. It'd be great if there were 2 card slots, but I've not really had an issue with having only the 1. Again, I've not had a single failure, and it's not that hard to pop 1 card out, put another one in. Doesn't take that long at all. Moving on to number 3, and that is battery life. Now, I know a lot of people out there, measure battery life in different ways. Some people like to do it, like screen on time or shots. However they want to measure it, I prefer to look at it in real world scenarios. In a real world scenario, you aren't really shooting from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. I know some people are, but for people that are sort of freelancing out like I do, you're gonna go to a shoot, you're gonna be there for a few hours, you're gonna come back, take your footage off, you might go to another shoot a bit later on, and the camera's sort of going between this on and off state. So in my experience, the battery life of the Nikon Z6 has been fantastic. In fact, what I've found is that the Z6 battery life is pretty much the same as what I was getting with the a7 III, in the sense that I charge it about as often as I charged the batteries when I had the Sony a7 III. Now, I do have 2 spare batteries. Sometimes I'll use them, but what I find is, so the other week, maybe 2 weeks ago, I went to a shoot, so I had an hour shoot in the morning, and then I had another hour shoot in the afternoon, and I shot a YouTube video in the middle of the day. So the camera was between uses, and the two shoots, which were an hour long, were a mixture of both 4K video and photography, so I was switching between the two. And I haven't charged the camera since, and in between then I've shot maybe 2 or 3 YouTube videos, and it's just getting low now, but it is still going. So for me, that's fantastic. I don't have to charge it as often as some other cameras. Another great thing is the battery that comes in the Nikon Z6 can be charged via USB-C, which is super handy because everyone loves USB-C and charging on the go is fantastic. It would be great if I could shoot and charge at the same time, but you know, maybe in a software update. Moving on to number 4, and that is the weather sealing of this camera. One of my biggest concerns with the Sony a7 III was the weather sealing. They never really touted it when they announced the camera about how good it was, and Sony's in general, there's always been, you know, quite a few posts in the forums about how the weather sealing has failed them, water getting in the EVF and all this sort of stuff. So I was really concerned, especially because for the majority of the time I live in Canada and it's snowing and it's, you know, extreme conditions where don't really want the weather sealing to fail. And my biggest concern was like the weakest parts generally are going to be the flaps where your ports are, especially if you shoot video because you're opening and closing them a lot. The ports on the a7 III, flimsy as all hell. I hated them. Like I thought they were gonna snap off. But the Z6 and its weather sealing is so good. The flaps are made of this nice sort of rubber silicone. They have a nice satisfying click when you push them in. You know, all the lenses have rubber gaskets, so does the lens mount. Like the whole thing is just amazing, and Nikon themselves touts it as one of their best features, and it is so good. I never worry about taking this out in the rain at all. And moving on to my last point, number 5, that is the touchscreen and EVF. As far as EVFs go, the Nikon Z6 is the second best on the market, second to the Panasonic S1. That camera is also about $1,000 more than the Z6. And I love it. The EVF is so crystal clear sharp, especially when you come from the Sony a7 III, which was, yeah, it's okay, but the quality is not great. And then you come to the Z6 and realize how bad it actually was. It's super clear and just a joy to use, but also that touchscreen. Oh, I wish every camera had a proper touchscreen. The Sony a7 III didn't have one. The X-T3 didn't have one. Like it has like functions, but you can't touch the menus. The Z6, you can go through the menus. It works perfectly. You can pinch to zoom when you take photos to make sure you get focus. I love it. No, it doesn't flip out. Some people say that's an issue. I personally don't have a problem with it. I find that the 3-axis tilt thing, whatever you want to call it, articulating screen, works well enough when I'm taking photos. In fact, I prefer that to the flippy screen when taking photos. It'd be great to be able to see myself when I'm filming, but that is just a small part of what I use the camera for, and that's sort of like a trade I'd happily have for the screen that is on this Z6. It is absolutely fantastic, and again, just like going through the menus, works just like using an iPhone or an Android phone. Like it just does what you think it should do. Anyway, guys, that about wraps up this video. My 5 favorite things about the Z6. There are actually a lot more. Those are just the ones that sort of made the list. So if you guys have been on the fence about picking one up, hopefully this has sort of cleared up a few things. And of course, ask a question down below in the comments if there is something I haven't mentioned that you might want to know about the Z6. And again, there'll be a link in the description if you want to pick one up for yourself. But that's it from me today, guys. Until the next video, see ya.